Welcome to our deep dive into this fascinating world of loonshots.
Yeah.
Those bold ideas that often seem crazy at first.
Crazy, but with the potential to really shake things up.
Yeah, exactly, like revolutionize industries. And we'll be exploring Safi Bahcall's book, Loonshots.
To understand why some brilliant teams kill these game changers.
And how we can cultivate them instead.
Yeah.
So to start, can you just give us like a quick overview of what loonshots actually are?
Okay, so imagine groundbreaking ideas like the telephone.
Right.
Or even the development of statin drugs initially met with tons of skepticism.
People probably thought they were nuts.
Exactly. Bahcall actually categorizes these as either P-type loonshots, which involve product breakthroughs.
Like what?
Like the jet engine.
Okay.
Or S-type loonshots, which represent strategic shifts, like American Airlines' two-tier pay system, a total game changer.
It's wild how something like a small change in group dynamics can like make or break whether a loonshot actually takes off or just fizzles out.
It really is.
It's like that tipping point thing.
Yeah.
Bahcall makes this really interesting connection to the science of phase transitions.
Right.
Like water changing from liquid to ice.
With just a tiny temperature change.
Right. And teams can suddenly shift from like embracing those radical ideas
to completely rejecting them.
So can you give us an example of how this plays out like in the real world?
Okay, so think about Akira Endo and his work on statin drugs.
Oh, yeah.
His research program faced setback after setback.
What Bahcall calls those
false fails.
False fails.
That felt fatal at the time.
But he kept going.
He did. And his persistence shows us that sometimes championing a loonshot means really believing in its potential.
Even when everyone's telling you you're wrong.
Even when it's tough.
Yeah. And it sounds like this false fail thing isn't just some like one-off thing.
Not at all.
I mean, we see it over and over again.
All the time. Take Judah Folkman's work on angiogenesis inhibitors.
Oh, yeah.
Initially dismissed as clown research.
Yeah.
Really highlights that we have to challenge those prevailing assumptions sometimes.
And champion unconventional approaches.
Even when we face resistance.
Even when people think you're crazy.
Exactly.
And what about in the tech world?
Oh, tons of examples.
Okay, like what?
Remember Friendster?
Yeah.
Vaguely. Many thought it was a flawed business model that led to its downfall, but it was a software glitch that drove users away.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel saw this as a false fail and capitalized on it with Facebook.
So he basically saw an opportunity that everyone else missed.
He saw the potential.
Yeah. This brings us to this concept of the Moses trap. Which I find absolutely fascinating. Can you tell us more about that?
So the Moses trap is when a powerful leader dictates which ideas win.
Oh.
Stifling any kind of open dialogue, and that kills innovation.
Like they become the bottleneck.
Exactly. And we've seen this happen with some big companies.
Like which ones?
Pan Am and Polaroid.
Oh, wow. Iconic companies.
Both led by visionary leaders who fell into the Moses trap. Pan Am's Juan Trippe was fixated on the biggest, fastest planes, neglecting crucial strategic shifts.
While Polaroid's Edwin Land.
Blinded by his own inventions, dismissed the whole digital photography thing.
So it seems like it doesn't matter how brilliant you are.
You need systems that encourage a balance of ideas.
To avoid relying too much on one person.
No matter how brilliant they are.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we've talked about how organizational structure can impact innovation.
Yeah.
But can the science of phase transitions actually offer some guidance on this?
Absolutely. Just like that small temperature change with water.
Right.
Seemingly insignificant changes in an organization can change the whole innovation dynamic.
So if we think about a team like molecules,
Okay.
could something as simple as a new leader
Or a tight deadline.
freeze the flow of ideas?
It could. It's like a sudden drop in temperature.
That freezes water.
Exactly.
Interesting. So we can accidentally stifle innovation, but we can also design structures that promote it.
And that's the exciting part.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, this brings us to percolation.
Percolation.
It might sound like a jump, but bear with me. Percolation. Like coffee.
Yeah. Is there a connection?
It's a scientific concept that explains how things spread through networks.
Okay.
Whether it's water through coffee grounds, a virus, or an idea through an organization.
So understanding how coffee brews can help us understand how to spread ideas in a company.
It might sound a bit far-fetched, but percolation theory has been used in tons of fields.
Really? Like?
Analyzing how forest fires spread, even understanding how terror networks work.
Wow.
A physicist, Neil Johnson, used it to study terrorism. He analyzed online behavior and found how virtual terror cells emerge and spread.
Which can help predict and prevent attacks.
Exactly.
So we can see parallels between forest fires and the spread of ideas within a company.
We can.
That's pretty amazing.
It highlights how everything's connected.
Yeah. So how do we apply these principles to create an environment where those loonshots can actually flourish?
Bahcall suggests creating a loonshot nursery.
A loonshot nursery.
A space within an organization dedicated to those fragile, unconventional ideas. And there are 3 key elements.
Which are?
Phase separation, dynamic equilibrium, and critical mass.
So phase separation sounds kind of like separating the artists from the soldiers.
Right.
Letting those pursuing loonshots operate differently than those focused on the core business.
Exactly. And dynamic equilibrium ensures a constant exchange between those groups.
So it's like a two-way street.
Yes, loonshots are grounded in market realities.
While established teams stay open to potentially disruptive innovations.
You got it.
And critical mass, I'm guessing, means having enough resources and talent.
Yes.
To create a self-sustaining ecosystem where innovation can actually thrive?
Okay, so are there any real-world examples of this loonshot nursery concept in action?
Absolutely. Look at the film industry. Major studios focus on those big, predictable blockbusters, and then you have independent production companies.
Right.
They often nurture those quirky, unconventional films.
That later get critical acclaim.
Exactly.
And is this just limited to the arts?
No way! The rise of biotech companies is another example.
Okay, how so? They're often pursuing risky, unproven approaches,
Wow.
while those big pharmaceutical giants focus on incremental improvements.
So it's like a parallel track.
A similar dynamic.
Gotcha. And what about government agencies?
Even those. Take DARPA, for example.
They fund some pretty out there research projects.
They embrace uncertainty and empower talented individuals.
To chase those unconventional ideas.
Exactly.
So creating a loonshot nursery sounds like a balancing act
It is.
between structure and freedom.
You need the right environment for those groundbreaking ideas to actually emerge.
But how do we even measure whether an organization is actually fostering loonshots?
Well, Bahcall has this interesting concept called a magic number.
A magic number.
It's a critical size,
Okay.
beyond which organizations start prioritizing internal politics over innovation.
So once a company gets too big, it's harder to nurture those groundbreaking ideas.
It can be factors like equity stakes, management span, and reward structures all influence this magic number.
So are you saying that big companies are just inherently less innovative?
Not at all. Leaders can actually raise this magic number with the right strategies.
Really? So what are some practical steps that leaders can take?
One way is to make compensation decisions less subjective.
To reduce the focus on politics.
Exactly.
Are there other strategies?
Yeah. Using soft equity can help.
What's that?
Things like peer recognition or opportunities for more impactful work.
Instead of just focusing on financial rewards?
And making sure that employees' skills match project requirements can help too.
So they're challenged but not overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's about designing those incentives that encourage loonshots.
Instead of just internal competition.
Right.
So there are ways to design systems.
To support those game-changing ideas.
Even within those larger organizations.
Absolutely. And there are leaders who understood this intuitively.
Oh, really? Even before the term loonshot was a thing.
Yeah.
So who are some of those leaders and what can we learn from them?
2 remarkable figures come to mind, Vannevar Bush and Theodore Vail.
Okay. Tell me more about them.
They both recognized the need for separate structures to cultivate both disruptive innovations and their established operations.
So they were kind of doing phase separation without knowing it.
Pretty much.
Ah.
So Vannevar Bush was this incredible engineer.
Okay.
He was instrumental in setting up the U.S. scientific research infrastructure during World War II.
Wow.
He understood that the military's rigid structure wasn't good for fostering those radical breakthroughs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he spearheaded the creation of the Office of Scientific Research and Development.
Ah, the OSRD.
Yes, a parallel structure operating with much more autonomy and a tolerance for risk.
So it was like a safe space for scientists.
To pursue unconventional ideas.
That ultimately helped win the war.
Ideas like radar, the proximity fuse, and the mass production of penicillin all came from that.
That's a powerful testament to the importance of structure.
In fostering innovation.
Even in those risk-averse institutions.
Exactly. And then you have Theodore Vail.
Okay. What did he do?
He was the president of AT&T.
In the early 20th century?
Yeah. He faced this challenge of balancing AT&T's existing telephone network expansion with developing those groundbreaking new technologies.
So how did he manage that?
He created Bell Labs, a
Ah,
dedicated research and development arm separate from the pressures of immediate profits.
smart.
Bell Labs became a breeding ground for breakthroughs.
Like-
The transistor, the laser, even the
Like-
Unix operating system.
It's incredible how both Bush and Vail just understood this need for separation.
They did.
Their legacies really show that organizational structure shapes behavior and success in the long term.
It's not just about gathering the best minds.
It's about creating systems where those brilliant minds can really thrive,
Exactly. And their stories offer a blueprint for any organization.
regardless of size or industry.
Even someone like Steve Jobs, initially prone to the Moses trap.
Wait, really? Steve Jobs.
Yeah, he eventually learned to embrace these principles too.
That's interesting. Jobs known for a strong personality and control.
Right.
Learning to let go. How did that happen?
Well, Jobs' early leadership style.
Which was very successful.
Oh, yeah. It created iconic products like the Apple II and Macintosh. It also created a lot of friction within Apple.
How so?
He fostered this intense rivalry between his pirates working on the Mac and the regular Navy responsible for the Apple II,
Oh, wow.
which ultimately led to his exile from the company in 1985.
So his early success might have actually reinforced that Moses trap tendency.
Yeah, it made it hard for him to see the value of different perspectives.
But then he had that time away from Apple founding NXT and investing in Pixar.
And that became a huge learning experience for him,
He saw the flaws in his old approach.
and started to appreciate the value of structure and balance.
And then when he returned to Apple in 1997.
He brought that newfound appreciation with him.
Okay, so how did that manifest? What specific changes did he make?
Well, he shut down Apple's clone program.
The one that allowed other companies to make Mac-compatible computers?
Yeah, he created a closed ecosystem.
Which was a pretty bold move.
It was. It limited market share initially, but ultimately fostered greater customer loyalty.
And control over the user experience.
Exactly. Jobs also brought in Tim Cook
A master of operations.
to oversee Apple's supply chain and manufacturing.
So he separated those artists from the soldiers.
Yes. He ensured that Apple's operations ran smoothly while he focused on the products and innovation.
A great example of dynamic equilibrium.
It is.
But didn't Jobs initially resist those strategic shifts, those S-type loonshots?
He did, but eventually he came around.
Yeah.
He spearheaded the creation of the iTunes Music Store.
Which was revolutionary,
It was. It transformed the music industry,
even though a lot of people were skeptical.
inside and outside Apple.
It's amazing how he adapted and evolved as a leader
He recognized the value of those strategic shifts.
that he'd initially dismissed.
It really shows that even visionary figures like Jobs can learn and adapt.
It's inspiring.
It is. And it brings us back to those false fails we talked about.
Right. It seems like organizations often misinterpret setbacks,
They do.
and then they abandon potentially promising ideas too early.
It happens all the time. There are these cognitive biases that cloud our judgment.
Like what?
Availability bias, for one.
Oh,
It
yeah.
makes us overestimate the likelihood of events that we easily recall.
Like past failures.
Exactly. So if a company has a history of failed innovation projects,
They're going to be more pessimistic about new ideas.
even if those ideas are good,
Right. And then there's confirmation bias.
which makes things even worse.
How so?
It makes us favor information that confirms what we already believe.
Even if our beliefs are wrong.
So we might ignore evidence that contradicts our negative assessment of a project.
Just digging ourselves deeper into that hole.
Exactly. And then there's loss aversion.
That psychological thing where losses feel worse than gains feel good.
Right? It makes organizations super cautious
They prioritize avoiding potential losses,
over pursuing those potential gains.
which ends up stifling innovation.
Right. So we need to create systems that encourage objective evaluation and challenge assumptions.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Promote open dialogue where everyone can share their opinions, even if they disagree,
Okay.
and set clear criteria for evaluating projects.
To minimize subjective judgments.
Exactly.
It seems like fostering a growth mindset is key here.
It is. Organizations need to see failures as learning experiences.
Rather than just like blaming the idea or the team.
Right. They have to embrace that innovation is an iterative process.
Okay. But even with the right mindset and systems in place,
Sometimes loonshots still need a dedicated champion.
Ah, those unsung heroes of innovation.
They're the ones who really believe in an idea.
And go above and beyond to make it happen.
Exactly. But what makes an effective champion?
Well, they have to really understand the technical aspects of their loonshot.
And the organizational dynamics that might get in the way.
They need to be able to explain the value of their loonshot to everyone.
From skeptical engineers to risk-averse executives.
So they need to be persuasive and persistent.
They have to be able to articulate their idea and navigate those obstacles.
And they need to be resilient.
Able to bounce back from setbacks and keep that enthusiasm going.
Even when things get tough.
And most importantly, they need political savvy.
To build those alliances and navigate organizational politics.
Exactly.
So identifying and nurturing these champions is critical for any organization.
It is. If they want to cultivate loonshots.
Right. They need to create a culture that rewards those who take risks and champion those unconventional ideas.
Yes. And provide training and development to give them the skills they need to succeed.
And leaders need to recognize and support those champions.
They play a vital role in driving innovation.
Okay, so let's circle back to phase separation.
Okay.
You mentioned it as a crucial element of a loonshot nursery.
Yeah.
Can you expand on how creating distinct structures for loonshots and franchises can actually benefit both?
Sure. So phase separation prevents those responsible for the core business.
For accidentally killing off those loonshots.
Right. And this separation can take different forms.
Like what?
Physically locating teams in different buildings or having distinct reporting structures and performance metrics.
So tailoring the environment to each type of innovation.
Yes. Loonshot teams need autonomy flexibility, a tolerance for risk.
To experiment, iterate, and even fail.
Without the pressure of immediate profit.
And franchise teams.
They need efficiency predictability.
A focus on execution.
Clear goals, established processes, and a culture that rewards consistency.
So trying to house both within the same structure can lead to conflict.
It often does. Loonshot teams feel stifled.
And franchise teams see those experiments as disruptive and wasteful.
Exactly. By separating those teams,
It's a win-win.
both can flourish.
But this separation requires careful planning.
Of course.
Yeah.
You need to think about the organizational structure, communication, and incentive systems.
Right. It's about creating boundaries, but also ensuring communication.
Yes.
So we need a way for those separate groups to exchange ideas and feedback.
Right. We don't want loonshot teams to be isolated from market realities.
Which brings us back to dynamic equilibrium.
Exactly.
So what are some practical ways to achieve that?
Cross-functional teams
Made up of members from both groups.
can work together on specific projects to foster collaboration,
And regular communication channels.
like meetings, presentations, or online forums.
To share information and feedback.
Right.
And what about rotation programs?
Those can be great too, where employees spend time working in both environments
So they gain experience in both worlds.
and develop empathy and cross-functional expertise,
And mentoring can be helpful.
where experienced members of franchise teams can guide those in loonshot teams,
So it's about creating this symbiotic relationship.
where loonshots inform franchise development.
And franchises provide feedback and resources to support those loonshots.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about dynamic equilibrium and phase separation.
Yeah.
But what about critical mass?
Ah, yes. That's about having enough talent, resources, and ideas.
To sustain that vibrant loonshot ecosystem.
Right. It's about reaching that tipping point.
Where innovation becomes self-sustaining.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we get there?
It takes a deliberate effort. You have to attract and retain top talent by creating a stimulating environment,
Right.
investing in promising projects, and celebrating those successes.
So it's about building momentum.
Yes. Once you achieve critical mass, those successful projects attract even more talent.
Which fuels more innovation and attracts more investment.
It becomes this positive feedback loop.
A dynamic environment where loonshots can really flourish.
Exactly. It's like a flywheel that once it's going, it generates its own momentum.
But maintaining that momentum takes work.
It does. You have to constantly adapt to changing markets, reassess your loonshot portfolio, and resist complacency.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Nope. You have to constantly nurture that innovative edge.
Okay, so we've talked about the ideal environment for fostering loonshots.
We have.
But large organizations, despite their resources, often struggle with this.
They do.
Why is that?
Their size and complexity, while good for managing established operations,
Can create a lot of inertia.
and resistance to change.
So what are some of those specific challenges that they face?
Bureaucracy, for one.
With all its layers of approval and rigid hierarchies.
It can really stifle the agility and experimentation that loonshots need.
It's like trying to steer a giant ship through a narrow channel.
Exactly.
Right.
It's slow and cumbersome, and there's a big risk of running aground.
Right. And then there's risk aversion.
Fueled by that fear of failure and a focus on short-term results.
Makes it really hard to secure funding for those unconventional ideas.
Right.
And what about silo mentality,
That's another big one.
where departments operate in isolation?
Prioritizing their own goals over the organization's,
It's like those separate kingdoms within an empire,
each focused on their own internal affairs.
oblivious to the potential synergy.
Bottom lie beyond their border,
Exactly. And then there's the lack of psychological safety.
which can be really detrimental
Because when employees are afraid to speak up,
or challenge the status quo.
creativity is stifled.
And those valuable dissenting opinions get silenced,
It's like having a room full of brilliant people.
but only hearing from those who agree with the prevailing narrative.
Okay, so how do organizations overcome these challenges?
It takes a conscious effort to simplify those processes, empower individuals, and foster a culture that embraces risk.
And values diverse perspectives.
Exactly. And leadership plays a huge role here.
They have to set the tone.
Champion innovation, set a clear vision, and provide the necessary resources,
And support.
even when those ideas challenge the norm.
So they can't just talk about innovation.
We have to actually walk the walk
Lead by example.
and celebrate those failures as learning opportunities,
To shift that organizational mindset
away from that fear of failure.
towards a culture of experimentation.
Exactly.
Okay, so how can leaders practically foster this loonshot mindset within their organizations?
Well, it requires a multifaceted approach that addresses both structure and culture.
Okay, so let's break that down.
The first step is communicating that vision for innovation,
Oh.
showing its importance through actions, and providing the necessary resources.
Even when those ideas are unconventional.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just talk about it.
You have to actually support it.
Right. What else?
Leaders also have to actively cultivate that culture of experimentation,
Okay.
encouraging employees to take risks and learn from those failures.
And that means creating psychological safety.
Yes, making sure that people feel comfortable expressing themselves and challenging the status quo.
Without fear of punishment.
Exactly.
It's about creating that environment where it's safe to fail
As long as you learn from it.
and apply those learnings to future projects.
Right.
What about the role of structure in all of this?
That's important too.
How so?
Creating dedicated loonshot teams or innovation labs that operate with more autonomy and flexibility
Can give them the space to experiment.
outside the constraints of the core business,
So it's like creating those pockets of innovation
where disruptive ideas can thrive.
without getting bogged down by the bureaucracy.
It's-
And incentive systems play a role too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to reward employees for taking risks, championing loonshots, and contributing to those breakthrough innovations.
So rethink traditional performance metrics.
Right.
Move away from that sole focus on short-term results.
And recognize the long-term value of innovation.
So aligning those incentives with the desired behaviors.
Yes.
Rewarding those who embrace risk,
And contribute to groundbreaking innovations.
even if those innovations don't pay off immediately.
Exactly. And don't forget about non-financial rewards,
Okay.
peer recognition, or opportunities for professional development.
To really foster a culture that values innovation.
Right.
So even with the right structures, incentives, and culture in place,
You still have to communicate the value of those loonshots.
because they often challenge conventional wisdom
They do.
and face resistance from those who are invested in the status quo.
It's about getting buy-in, securing resources, and getting support.
So how do we do that effectively?
Well, you have to tailor your message to the audience.
Understanding their priorities, concerns, and motivations.
So, for example, if you're presenting a loonshot to a risk-averse executive
You might emphasize its potential to reduce future threats.
or create new market opportunities.
Instead of just focusing on how cool the technology is.
Right. So framing the loonshot in a way that resonates with the decision makers.
And highlights the value it brings to the organization.
Yeah. And what about storytelling?
That can be powerful too.
How so?
Stories engage our emotions and make those complex ideas easier to grasp.
Okay.
Sharing anecdotes about past loonshots that have succeeded
Highlighting the challenges they face
and the impact they made.
can really inspire belief and support.
It's about painting a picture of the potential future.
And tapping into both logic and emotion.
Exactly.
But we also need concrete evidence
Of course.
to back up the loonshot's feasibility.
Data from prototypes, market research, or pilot programs can help.
to show that the idea is worth pursuing.
Right.
So it's about striking that balance.
Between inspiration and evidence,
Mhm.
appealing to both the head and the heart.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even with the best narrative and evidence.
It can still be tough to overcome inertia and resistance.
So how do we do that?
Create a sense of agency.
Now,
Highlight the consequences of inaction.
right.
Losing market share to competitors or failing to adapt to those changing customer needs.
Okay.
This can motivate stakeholders to embrace that change.
So framing the loonshot as a necessity,
Not just an opportunity.
a critical response to those challenges.
Exactly.
But even with persuasive communication,
We need to understand the innovation process itself.
it's about embracing experimentation.
And encouraging trial and error.
Okay, so talk to me more about the role of experimentation in fostering loonshots,
Experimentation is crucial.
especially for those loonshots that challenge conventional wisdom.
It's about testing those assumptions, exploring different approaches, and iterating based on what you learn.
So embracing that messiness of innovation.
The path to success is rarely a straight line.
Exactly. And that requires leadership that encourages risk-taking.
And sees failures as valuable lessons,
So organizations should celebrate those experiments,
regardless of the outcome,
recognizing the knowledge gained.
from both the successes and the failures.
So it's a shift in focus.
From outcomes to process,
The value isn't just in achieving success,
but in the learnings along the way,
and creating dedicated spaces for experimentation can help
like innovation labs.
to free those teams from the constraints of the core business.
Give them a sandbox to play in.
But we still need clear processes for experimentation
Of course.
to make sure those experiments are well designed
Data is collected and analyzed
and those learnings are shared.
throughout the organization
So it's about structured experimentation.
to maximize learning and minimize waste
We need open communication,
and feedback
encouraging teams to share both their wins and their losses,
to create that collaborative learning environment.
where everyone benefits from those shared experiences. Okay, so we've talked about experimentation,
Yeah.
but what about the role of diversity in fostering those loonshots,
Diversity is absolutely crucial,
for fostering innovation?
especially when it comes to those groundbreaking ideas,
Because teams with diverse backgrounds
perspectives, and experiences.
bring a wider range of knowledge, skills, and approaches,
It's about harnessing the power of those different lenses.
different ways of seeing the world and solving problems,
Exactly.
and that cognitive diversity
Can challenge those assumptions, expand the solution space.
and increase the chances of coming up with those truly novel ideas,
You got it. And remember, diversity isn't just about demographics.
like gender, race, or ethnicity.
It's also about functional diversity.
The range of skills, knowledge, and expertise.
Exactly.
So it's not just about checking boxes.
It's about creating teams with a genuine mix of perspectives, experiences, and expertise.
And cognitive diversity is key, too.
Absolutely.
Those differences in thinking styles
Problem-solving approaches.
and perspectives.
That's what challenges groupthink, encourages creative thinking, and leads to more robust solutions.
So creating truly diverse teams takes more than just good intentions.
It does.
We need to rethink traditional recruitment practices,
Okay.
broaden the pool of candidates,
And actively seek out people from underrepresented groups,
and foster an inclusive culture
where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered.
to share their unique perspectives.
Exactly.
So it's not just about getting diverse people in the door.
It's about creating an environment where they can thrive.
Right. Okay, so now let's talk about organizational structure.
Okay.
How does the way a company is structured impact its ability to nurture loonshots?
The structure with its reporting relationships, communication channels, and decision-making processes
Plays a huge role.
in shaping innovation dynamics.
So some structures are better for nurturing loonshots.
Than others.
Okay, so walk me through the different types.
First, you have hierarchical structure.
With their rigid chains of command and centralized decision-making.
They can stifle innovation.
How?
They slow down communication, limit autonomy, and discourage risk-taking.
It's like trying to steer a massive ship with a tiny rudder
It is. You can't make those quick course corrections.
that you need in the fast-paced world of innovation.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Flat structures.
Fewer layers of management, more employee empowerment.
They tend to be more agile and adaptable.
Oh.
They can make decisions faster and experiment more.
Because they've pushed decision-making down?
To those closest to the action,
The ones with the most relevant information.
who can respond quickly to new opportunities and challenges.
Makes sense. And what about matrix structures?
Those are interesting.
How so?
Individuals report to multiple managers
Okay.
and work on cross-functional teams.
So it can promote collaboration.
And cross-pollination of ideas,
But
but it can also create complexity and confusion.
right, it's like a double-edged sword.
You get more collaboration, but it can be harder to make decisions.
And that can slow down innovation.
Exactly.
Okay, what other structures are there?
Network structures.
Okay, what are those like?
Loose connections, decentralized authority. It empowers individuals and teams to pursue ideas outside the traditional hierarchy,
So it's about embracing that fluidity
allowing ideas to flow and evolve organically.
without being constrained by those rigid boundaries.
Exactly.
So it seems like the optimal structure for fostering loonshots
Depends on the context.
and the organization's goal.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. But are there any general principles that apply across the board?
Definitely structures that prioritize autonomy, flexibility, and communication.
Tend to be better for innovation.
Right.
So organizations should minimize bureaucracy, empower individuals, and create those clear channels for feedback.
And idea sharing,
It's about finding that balance between structure and freedom,
providing guidance and support, but also allowing space for creativity.
and being willing to experiment with different structures.
Adapting as you learn and as your needs evolve.
But even the most innovative structures can fail.
If you don't have the right culture,
Right, because culture really shapes behavior within organizations.
it does.
So tell me more about how culture impacts the success of Loonshots.
Cultures that embrace risk-taking, value diverse perspectives, and celebrate experimentation.
Are much more likely to nurture those Loonshots.
Right.
But cultures that are risk-averse, hierarchical, and resistant to change,
They can really stifle innovation.
even if you have all the right structural elements in place,
It's like having fertile soil but planting your seeds in a concrete pot.
they might sprout, but they'll never truly flourish.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of those key cultural elements that make an environment loonshot friendly,
Well, a growth mindset is crucial.
where people believe they can develop their ability?
Through hard work and dedication,
Right.
this encourages experimentation and sees failures as opportunities to learn
So it's about fostering that belief in continuous learning,
and improvement,
where people are encouraged to push their boundaries.
and see challenges as opportunities to grow.
Exactly. And what about psychological safety,
That's paramount, too.
where people feel comfortable expressing themselves
Sharing their ideas and challenging the status quo.
without fear of being punished or ridiculed?
Exactly.
So creating that safe space for vulnerability.
Where people can freely share their thoughts and ideas.
What else?
A tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty.
Okay.
This allows people to explore unproven ideas and navigate the messiness of innovation.
So embracing that discomfort of venturing into the unknown.
Knowing that's where those breakthrough opportunities often lie.
Right. And we can't forget about the importance of celebrating diversity,
Absolutely.
valuing and respecting people from all backgrounds
Perspectives and experiences.
to expand the solution space and increase the chances of generating those truly novel ideas.
Exactly.
So diversity isn't just a nice thing to have.
It's a strategic advantage.
That drives innovation.
Right.
Okay, so what about the focus on short-term versus long-term impact?
Ah, yes, that's an important one, too.
How so?
Organizations that are focused on the long term are more likely to invest in loonshots.
Even if those ideas take time to mature and generate returns,
Right.
it's about having that long-term vision,
And being willing to play the long game
because true innovation often requires patience.
and a belief in the eventual payoff.
Okay, so it seems like fostering a loonshot-friendly culture is an ongoing process.
It definitely is. It requires a sustained effort.
What are some of those key actions that organizations can take?
Modeling the desired behaviors from the top down,
Okay.
communicating those values clearly,
And establishing systems and processes that reinforce those values. So walking the talk.
ensuring that your actions align with your values.
Right. And celebrating those successes
Recognizing and rewarding those who contribute to innovation
to reinforce those behaviors.
and motivate others to do the same,
So it's a positive feedback loop,
where success breeds more success.
and innovation becomes ingrained in the culture.
Exactly. And you need to be willing to challenge those existing norms.
Adapting those cultural elements as the organization grows and the landscape changes.
It's about continuous evolution and improvement.
Right. So it's not about clinging to tradition for tradition's sake
It's about being open to new ways of doing things.
and adapting to the changing needs of the organization and the market.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about creating the right environment for loonshots,
We have.
but culture isn't everything.
Of course not.
We also need to talk about feedback,
which is crucial for any idea
But especially for those fragile loonshots.
that face so much skepticism.
So why is feedback so important for loonshots?
It provides valuable insights.
Okay.
It helps those champions identify blind spots, refine their approach, and address those potential challenges.
So it's not just about criticizing,
It's about providing guidance and support.
helping those champions navigate the obstacles.
Exactly. Feedback also builds confidence.
How so?
It shows that the organization is invested in the idea and is willing to provide support.
Right, and it creates accountability.
Encouraging those champions to iterate, improve, and show progress.
Okay, so what are the qualities of effective feedback?
It needs to be timely,
Okay.
provided soon after an event or milestone, so the information is still relevant.
So striking while the iron is hot.
Exactly. And it needs to be specific,
Focusing on concrete behaviors, actions, or outcomes.
rather than vague generalities,
Okay.
and it has to be actionable,
Offering clear suggestions for improvement.
not just pointing out flaws.
So it's not enough to say, this is wrong.
You have to explain how to make it better.
Right. And how it's delivered matters too.
Feedback should be delivered with empathy and respect.
Recognizing the effort and passion that those champions have invested.
Exactly.
Okay, so how can organizations create a culture of feedback?
Establish clear processes for giving feedback.
Okay.
Train people on how to give it effectively.
And reward those who provide valuable insights. So making feedback a routine part of the culture.
Not just a one-time thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes those breakthrough moments,
They come from unexpected places.
those chance encounters or unplanned collaborations.
That's the beauty of serendipity.
Those happy accidents.
That lead to unexpected discoveries and groundbreaking ideas.
So we can't control when those serendipitous moments will happen.
We can't.
But we can create environments that make them more likely.
We can.
How do we do that?
Foster a culture of openness.
Okay.
Encourage cross-functional interaction.
And design physical spaces that promote those chance encounters and informal idea exchanges. So create those opportunities for people to connect,
to bump into each other.
both literally and figuratively.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what are some specific examples of that?
Open floor plans, shared workspaces, communal areas.
Even a well-stocked coffee station.
All of those can encourage those impromptu interactions.
And those informal idea exchanges. It's about creating those spaces where people naturally congregate.
Where those casual conversations can lead to unexpected breakthroughs.
Exactly. And what about outside of the structured work environment?
Social events or team-building activities can help too.
To foster those unexpected connections.
Right. It's about breaking down the barriers between work and life.
Recognizing that those creative sparks can ignite when people connect on a personal level.
Exactly.
But embracing serendipity requires a shift in mindset.
It does.
Recognizing that not all great ideas come from structured brainstorming sessions.
Sometimes the best ideas come from those chance encounters.
Those unexpected collisions of thought.
Exactly.
So it's about being open to the unexpected.
Knowing that inspiration can strike at any time.
From any source.
Right?
Okay, so let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Not every loonshot is going to succeed.
That's true.
Failure is part of the process.
Especially when you're exploring new territory.
So how can organizations change their perception of failure?
To foster resilience and encourage people to keep chasing those groundbreaking ideas.
Because in a lot of organizations, failure is seen as a bad thing,
Something to avoid at all costs.
a sign of incompetence, not a necessary step in the learning process,
And that fear of failure leads to risk aversion.
which kills creativity and prevents those bold ideas from ever surfacing.
Exactly.
So to foster that loonshot mindset,
Organizations have to reframe their view of failure.
seeing it as a valuable learning opportunity.
A stepping stone to success.
So changing the narrative,
Changing how we think and talk about failure.
instead of seeing it as a negative outcome,
We need to embrace it as part of the journey.
right, and shift the focus from outcomes to process.
Instead of just evaluating projects based on success or failure.
We should assess the decision-making, the learnings, and the insights gained.
Exactly.
So asking, what did we learn?
Not just did we succeed or fail.
It's about extracting those valuable lessons.
That can inform future innovation efforts.
This approach encourages experimentation
Reduces the fear of failure.
and promotes that culture of continuous learning.
Right?
But it's important to distinguish between different types of failure.
You're right. Not all failures are created equal.
So there are productive failures.
And unproductive failures.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Productive failures happen when teams take calculated risks.
Okay.
They experiment, thoughtfully gather data, and apply those learnings to future endeavors.
So failing intelligently.
in a way that generates insights and informs future decisions.
even though it might be disappointing in the short term.
These failures actually contribute to long-term organizational learning.
And increase the chances of future success.
Exactly.
And what about unproductive failures?
Those are the ones where teams are reckless,
They don't gather data.
or they keep repeating the same mistakes
So those are the failures that are actually costly.
and don't really teach us anything.
So it's important to differentiate between those two
To encourage intelligent risk-taking?
and discourage recklessness.
Right.
It's not about celebrating failure for its own sake
It's about celebrating the learnings.
and the courage it took to experiment. So celebrating those productive failures
Recognizing the learnings and the courage it took to experiment.
can reinforce that loonshot mindset.
It can.
And sharing stories of failures
Both personal and organizational.
can normalize setbacks
And create a culture where people feel comfortable taking risks.
and learning from their mistakes.
Exactly.
So it's about creating that safety net
Or people know it's okay to fail
as long as they learn from it.
and apply those learnings to the future.
Exactly. By embracing failure as part of the process.
Organizations can create environments where loonshots thrive.
And resilience is fostered.
And those breakthrough successes become more likely.
But we also need to understand the limits of innovation.
You're right.
It's not just about encouraging those crazy ideas.
We have to recognize that not every idea is feasible or worth pursuing.
That's where the adjacent possible comes in.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what is the adjacent possible and how does it relate to loonshots?
The adjacent possible is a term coined by biologist Stuart Kaufman. It refers to the space of possibilities
That are immediately accessible.
from where we are right now. It's the set of ideas, innovations, and discoveries that are within reach.
Given our current knowledge, technology, and resources.
Exactly.
So it's like a map of the innovation landscape.
Highlighting the areas we can realistically explore.
Right.
But the adjacent possible isn't static.
It's constantly expanding.
As we explore new frontiers, acquire new knowledge, and develop new technologies.
So it's a moving target.
In a way.
And understanding this concept is important for nurturing loonshots.
It is. It tells us that while we should aim for those breakthroughs,
We also have to be realistic.
about what's achievable.
Right.
Trying to force innovation beyond the adjacent possible often leads to frustration
Wasted resources.
and ultimately failure.
So we should focus on exploring the edges of what's currently attainable.
Pursuing those ambitious but achievable ideas.
So pushing the boundaries.
And but not going too far into the realm of science fiction.
Right.
It's about identifying the constraints that are holding us back,
And finding ways to overcome them.
one step at a time.
Okay, so for example, if a loonshot requires technology that doesn't exist yet,
You might focus on developing that foundational technology first.
before jumping ahead.
Exactly.
So understanding the adjacent possible,
Helps us set realistic expectations
prioritize our efforts.
and increase our chances of success.
It's a reminder that while we should dream big
We should also be strategic and patient.
in our approach to innovation.
Right.
Okay, so we
Yep.
talked about the importance of understanding the adjacent possible.
We have.
But timing is crucial too.
It is.
An idea might be brilliant.
But if it's ahead of its time,
It might not succeed.
it might face resistance or a lack of demand.
So how do we know if an idea's time has come?
There are several factors to consider.
Okay.
Market readiness.
Okay.
Is there a customer base with a need for the solution?
And are they ready to embrace it?
Exactly.
And what about the technology?
Technological feasibility is important too.
Okay.
Is the technology mature enough to develop and deploy the solution?
So we're not trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Right.
And what about cultural acceptance?
That plays a role too.
Okay.
Do those societal norms, values, and beliefs support the solution? Even if a loonshot is technologically feasible and meets a market need.
It might fail if it clashes with cultural norms.
Exactly.
And what about the competitive landscape?
That's another important consideration.
Are there other companies offering similar solutions?
Right.
So understanding the market dynamics.
Who's already out there and what are they doing?
Exactly. So assessing all of these factors
Can help you determine whether the timing is right,
to pursue an idea,
if the market isn't ready or the technology isn't there yet,
it might be better to wait.
or to pivot to a different approach.
So patience and adaptability are key
They are.
for those loonshot champions.
Right.
But even when the timing is perfect,
Loonshots often face another obstacle,
organizational inertia,
that resistance to change.
that desire to maintain the status quo,
It can be a powerful force.
even when there's evidence that change is needed,
What's like trying to move a mountain?
takes a lot of effort to overcome that resistance.
It does.
Okay, so What contributes to organizational inertia?
Sunk costs, for one.
Okay.
Those investments that have already been made
In existing products, processes, or technologies,
can make it hard to embrace new approaches.
even when those new approaches are better,
It's like holding on to that losing stock,
because you've already invested so much.
even though you know you should sell,
Right. And we talked about the fear of failure earlier.
which can lead to risk aversion.
Stifling experimentation and those bold ideas,
It's that fear of stepping outside your comfort zone.
even though that's where the opportunities are,
Right. And organizational culture can play a role too,
especially in those hierarchical or bureaucratic organizations.
where creativity and dissent are discouraged.
And the status quo is reinforced,
It's like being stuck in a rut,
doing the same things over and over again.
even though they're not working.
Right. And what about vested interest?
Those individuals or groups who benefit from the status quo,
They can resist change,
especially if it threatens their power or influence,
like gatekeepers protecting their turf.
even if it hurts the organization as a whole.
So overcoming organizational inertia is no easy feat.
It takes a conscious and sustained effort.
So where do we start?
Leadership is crucial.
Okay.
Leaders have to recognize the need for change.
And communicate a clear vision for the future,
They need to be the driving force behind that transformation.
inspiring and motivating their teams to embrace change.
Exactly.
So they need to articulate the why behind the change
highlight the potential benefit.
and address the concerns of those who are resisting
Right.
and create a sense of urgency.
Making it clear that the status quo is no longer an option
So painting that picture of the risks of inaction.
and the rewards of embracing change.
Exactly. And what about empowering individuals and teams?
That's important too.
How so?
Giving them the autonomy and resources to pursue new ideas.
Streamlining those decision-making processes
Minimizing bureaucracy.
and fostering that culture of experimentation and risk-taking,
to create a more agile and adaptable organization.
so they can respond quickly to change.
Exactly.
And what about celebrating those early wins?
That can be a powerful motivator.
Recognizing and rewarding those who embrace change,
It shows that change is possible.
and that it can lead to positive outcomes.
Right.
And what about those who are actively resisting change?
You have to engage with them,
Okay.
understand their concerns, and find common ground.
To build consensus and facilitate those transitions.
Exactly.
So it's not about ignoring them.
It's about bringing them along on the journey.
Right. By overcoming organizational inertia,
Organizations can create environments that are more receptive to loonshots
allowing those disruptive ideas to take root and flourish.
and ultimately transform industries.
But even with the best intentions.
Resources are limited.
So how those resources are allocated.
Has a huge impact on which initiatives succeed.
So talk to me about resource allocation and how it affects Loonshots.
In many organizations, resource allocation processes are designed to
Support existing operations.
right
Maintain the status quo.
and minimize risk
So it's about exploiting what you already have.
instead of exploring those new opportunities.
Those responsible for allocating resources often prioritize the predictable
Even if the returns are small,
over those initiatives that can be transformative.
but have uncertain outcomes,
And this makes it tough to secure resources for Loonshots
which often needs significant upfront investment.
and may not generate immediate returns.
Exactly.
So how can organizations change this?
They need to rethink their processes.
Okay.
Establish mechanisms that allow for strategic investment in those breakthrough ideas.
While still supporting the core business.
Right.
So what are some specific steps they can take?
Create a separate budget for Loonshot innovation,
Okay.
so those initiatives have dedicated funding.
Independent of the core business.
Exactly.
So it's like a protected pool of resources.
For those high-risk, high-reward ventures.
Giving those teams the freedom to experiment
And pursue those transformative ideas.
without worrying about immediate profitability.
Exactly. And establish clear criteria for evaluating Loonshot proposals.
So you're not just funding every crazy idea.
Right.
It's about being strategic.
And prioritizing those ideas with the greatest potential for impact.
So what are some of those criteria?
They should go beyond just financial metrics.
Okay.
Consider the potential for disruption,
Okay.
alignment with long-term goals, and the feasibility of execution.
So taking a more holistic approach.
Recognizing that the value of a Loonshot goes beyond just money.
Right. And what about empowering those Loonshot teams?
Give them the authority to make resource allocation decisions.
Within their dedicated budget.
To foster agility and speed up the innovation process.
So trusting them to manage their resources.
And make those decisions without having to go through layers of bureaucracy.
Exactly. And it's important to regularly review and adjust.
based on progress learnings and market feedback.
To make sure those resources are being used effectively.
And that the investments are aligned with those evolving opportunities.
So it's an ongoing process.
A constant dialogue between strategy execution and learning.
Okay, so by thoughtfully addressing resource allocation,
Organizations can create environments that support both Loonshots and the core business.
maximizing their chances of success.
In both the short term and the long term.
Right. But resource allocation is just one piece of the puzzle.
It is.
We also need to cultivate that culture of continuous learning.
And improvement.
Because innovation is a journey.
Not a destination.
It's a continuous process of learning, adapting, and evolving.
Exactly.
So talk to me more about organizational learning.
It's how organizations acquire, share, and apply knowledge.
To improve their performance.
It's crucial for sustained innovation.
So it's about creating those feedback loops.
Capturing and sharing those learnings from both successes and failures.
Ensuring that the organization learns from its experiences.
And applies those learnings to the future.
Exactly. Organizations that are good at learning.
Are more likely to identify and pursue loonshots.
And adapt to changing conditions.
And achieve those breakthrough successes.
Okay, so how can organizations become better learners?
Well, first, they need to encourage experimentation and view failures as learning opportunities.
Like we talked about before.
This generates knowledge and insights.
It's about creating that safe space for taking risks.
Knowing that even if you fail, those learnings are valuable.
Right. And what about sharing those learnings?
You need clear processes for capturing and sharing that knowledge.
Okay.
So those insights from experiments, projects, and market interactions
Don't get lost.
that might involve creating knowledge repositories.
Okay.
Conducting after-action reviews.
Or establishing communities of practice.
Where people can share their expertise and experiences.
So it's about creating those systems and structures for making sure those valuable lessons are shared.
And used.
Right. And we talked about collaboration earlier.
Which is also crucial for organizational learning.
Encouraging people to interact with colleagues from different departments and disciplines.
It fosters knowledge transfer.
And helps people learn from each other.
Breaking down those silos.
And creating those aha moments.
That fuel innovation.
Exactly. And what about individual learning?
Organizations should encourage their employees to be continuous learners.
To pursue professional development opportunities.
Stay up to date on industry trends.
And challenge their own assumptions.
To keep the organization adaptable and innovative.
So fostering that culture of curiosity and continuous improvement.
Exactly.
By embracing organizational learning.
Organizations create that dynamic environment.
Where loonshots can be nurtured.
Knowledge is shared.
And innovation flourishes.
But none of this is possible without effective leadership.
Right. Because ultimately it's the leaders who set the tone.
Create the culture.
And provide the resources and support for innovation.
They play a pivotal role in fostering that loonshot innovation.
So what are the qualities of a leader who can successfully champion loonshots?
Well, they need a deep understanding of the organization's mission and strategic goals.
They need to be able to articulate a compelling vision for the future.
They're not just managing the day-to-day.
They're thinking about the big picture.
And how innovation can help them get there.
Right. And they need to be passionate about innovation.
Seeing it as essential for long-term success and competitive advantage.
So it's not just something they say.
It's something they truly believe in.
Exactly. And they need to be willing to take risks.
Embracing uncertainty and viewing failures as opportunities to learn.
So they're not afraid to push boundaries?
To challenge the status quo.
And venture into uncharted territory.
Exactly.
And they need to empower their teams.
Giving them the autonomy, resources, and support they need.
To pursue those unconventional ideas.
Because they're not micromanaging.
They're creating space for their teams to flourish.
Exactly.
And they need to foster a culture of experimentation.
Encouraging trial and error.
And celebrating both successes and learnings from failures. So creating that environment where it's safe to experiment and learn.
Exactly.
And they need to be champions for diversity.
Recognizing the value of different perspectives and experiences.
So they see diversity as a driver of innovation.
Not just a box to check.
Exactly. And they need to promote organizational learning.
Making sure that knowledge is captured, shared, and applied effectively.
Creating those feedback loops.
To ensure the organization learns from its experiences.
Right. And finally, they need to be persistent and resilient.
Committed to their vision.
Even when facing setbacks and resistance.
They need to have that unwavering belief in their vision.
And the tenacity to see it through.
Exactly. By embodying these qualities.
Leaders can create environments where loonshots thrive.
And innovation flourishes.
leading their organizations to those breakthrough successes.
But nurturing loonshots isn't just an internal effort.
Right. We can also look outside the organization
To those external collaborations.
to enhance our innovation efforts.
Exactly.
So tell me more about that.
Innovation ecosystems. It's a network of organizations, individuals, and institutions
I work together.
to foster innovation within a particular industry or sector,
So it's like a community of innovators.
all working towards a common goal.
Exactly. And who are some of the players in these ecosystems?
Universities, research institutions,
Startups?
venture capitalists, government agencies, established corporations,
It's a diverse mix.
each bringing something unique to the table.
Right. And engaging in these ecosystems can be really beneficial.
Okay, how so?
Access to cutting-edge research and technology
Okay.
that can expand the adjacent possible.
Giving those loonshot teams new tools and insights
Exactly. And collaboration with diverse partners.
can bring fresh perspectives
Challenge assumptions.
and lead to more innovative solutions.
Right.
It's about cross-pollinating ideas.
Exposing those loonshots to different ways of thinking.
And what about staying ahead of the curve?
Innovation ecosystems can help with that too.
How so?
They provide early access to emerging trends and market insights, helping organizations identify those promising loonshots.
And get a head start.
And what about resources?
Shared resources like funding infrastructure and expertise.
Can reduce the cost and risk of innovation.
Exactly.
So it's about leveraging the collective resources of the ecosystem.
To make innovation more accessible.
And what about speed?
Accelerated time to market.
Can give organizations a competitive edge.
Exactly.
So getting those loonshots to market faster
Before the competition.
to establish that first mover advantage.
Right.
But engaging in these ecosystems requires a strategic approach.
It does.
What are some of the things organizations need to keep in mind?
First, they need to identify the right partners
Those who align with their strategic goals.
and can contribute to their innovation efforts
So choosing those partners carefully.
to ensure compatibility.
Right. And then they need to establish clear goals
And expectations for the collaboration.
to ensure that both parties benefit.
So it's a win-win.
And they need to foster open communication and knowledge sharing.
Create a culture of trust and transparency.
So building strong relationships
And open lines of communication.
to ensure that information flows freely.
And both parties feel comfortable sharing their ideas and expertise.
Exactly. And they need to be willing to share resources and expertise.
Recognizing that collaboration is a two-way street.
It's about giving as well as receiving.
Exactly.
So by actively participating in those innovation ecosystems
Organizations can tap into a vast network of knowledge, resources, and talent.
to accelerate their innovation efforts.
And increase their chances of achieving those breakthrough successes.
Okay, so we've talked about collaboration.
Yeah.
But what about the role of technology in nurturing loonshots?
Technology is both an enabler and an accelerator of innovation.
Right. It's constantly creating new possibilities
Empowering those loonshot teams.
to achieve what was once thought impossible.
Exactly.
Okay, so give me some examples of how technology is changing the game for loonshots.
Cloud computing, for instance.
Okay,
It's made powerful computing resources accessible to everyone.
so startups and small teams can now pursue ideas that once required massive infrastructure investments.
Right.
It's leveled the playing field.
Allowing those smaller, more agile players to compete.
And what about artificial intelligence and machine learning?
They're transforming industries.
Enabling organizations to automate tasks, analyze huge amounts of data, and generate insights.
That would be impossible for humans to do alone.
So it's augmenting our capabilities.
Helping us tackle those complex challenges.
And uncover hidden patterns and insights.
Exactly.
So these technologies are empowering those loonshot teams
To explore new frontiers and develop those groundbreaking solutions.
that were once beyond reach.
Right.
And technology is also facilitating collaboration
Connecting people and teams across the globe.
to work together seamlessly,
Breaking down those barriers of distance and time.
allowing those loonshot teams to tap into a global pool of talent.
Expertise and perspective.
So it's creating a more interconnected world,
A global network of innovators.
working together to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Exactly.
And technology can also help organizations identify and evaluate loonshots
by providing access to data and analytics.
to inform decision-making.
Right.
So giving organizations those data-driven insights
To make more informed decisions about which loonshots to pursue.
and how to nurture them.
Exactly. Things like market research tools, social media analytics, and trend forecasting platforms.
can provide insights into emerging customer needs,
competitive landscapes, and technological advancements.
helping organizations identify those promising areas for innovation.
Exactly.
So it's about equipping organizations with the intelligence they need,
To make those strategic bets.
anticipate future trends, and capitalize on emerging opportunities.
Right. By embracing technology.
Organizations can empower those Loonshot teams
Span the adjacent possible.
and accelerate their journey towards disruptive innovation.
Exactly.
But it's not just about embracing technology.
It's also about embracing a more iterative, experimental approach to product development,
So moving away from those traditional linear approaches.
where you spend months or years planning and designing before you even see a prototype.
Right.
Rapid prototyping is all about creating and testing tangible representations of ideas
Quickly and iteratively.
to gather feedback, refine the approach, and make adjustments early on.
So getting those ideas out of people's heads,
And into the real world.
creating something tangible that people can interact with
And provide feedback
to
on.
help shape the development process.
Exactly.
So it's a more agile experimental approach
Where you're constantly testing, learning, and iterating.
based on real-world feedback.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are the benefits of this rapid prototyping approach?
Well, it encourages experimentation.
Okay.
It provides a low-cost, low-risk way to explore different approaches.
And identify the most promising solutions.
Right. It also facilitates communication.
How so?
You have a tangible representation of the idea.
That stakeholders can interact with and provide feedback on.
Exactly.
So moving beyond those abstract concepts
To something concrete.
that people can see, touch, and experience.
Exactly.
And what about the speed of learning?
Rapid prototyping accelerates learning.
By providing those quick feedback loops
So you can identify and address challenges early on.
and make those course corrections sooner.
Exactly.
And it reduces risk
By validating assumptions and identifying potential pitfalls.
before you invest too many resources.
Yeah.
So it's about mitigating risk through early and frequent testing.
Making sure you're building on a solid foundation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, so what are some of the different forms that rapid prototyping can take?
Well, you have physical prototypes
Like 3D printed models or mock-ups?
that allow users to interact with the product and provide feedback on its form, function, and usability
So giving them a hands-on experience.
to see how it works and how it might fit into their lives.
And what about digital prototypes?
Things like wireframes, mock-ups, or interactive simulations.
Can demonstrate the user experience and functionality of software,
Right.
so users can interact with the software
Explore its features.
and provide feedback on the overall experience.
Exactly. And then you have role-playing or scenario-based prototyping
Okay, what's that?
that can be used to test service concepts or business processes
Okay,
by simulating those real-world interactions
so users can experience the service or process firsthand.
and provide feedback on its effectiveness
So it's about simulating those real-world scenarios.
to get feedback on how the solution would actually work in practice.
Exactly, by embracing rapid prototyping.
Organizations can create a more experimental culture
Accelerate the innovation process.
and increase their chances of success
But we also need to gather feedback from those potential users.
throughout the development process.
Because ultimately, it's the customers who decide if an innovation is successful,
Their feedback is invaluable
especially for those loonshots that are targeting emerging needs.
or challenging those existing market paradigms.
So how do we gather that customer feedback effectively?
Well, there are a few different methods.
Okay, like what?
Surveys and questionnaires can provide quantitative data.
On user preferences, needs, and pain points,
Right, so you can get a sense of the general trend.
and preferences within the target market,
Exactly. And then you have focus groups and interviews
which allow for a more in-depth exploration.
of user experiences and motivations
It's having those one-on-one conversations.
to really understand their needs and perspectives.
And what about usability testing?
That's where you have potential users interact with prototypes or early versions of the product
Okay.
to get feedback on usability functionality and areas for improvement,
So observing how they actually use the product?
and identifying any pain points.
And what about beta testing?
That's where you give a select group of users early access to the product
Okay.
to get real-world feedback on its performance and features,
So releasing it to a small group of users.
to see how it works in a real-world setting.
But it's important to remember that not all feedback will be useful.
You're right. Not all feedback will be positive or actionable.
But even negative feedback can be valuable,
It can provide insights into potential challenges.
or areas for improvement. So it's about listening to all feedback.
And trying to extract those valuable nuggets of wisdom.
That can help shape the Loonshot's development
Exactly.
by actively seeking out and incorporating customer feedback.
Organizations can increase their chances of creating loonshots that meet real market needs.
And achieve that breakthrough success.
Right. But sometimes, even after gathering feedback and iterating on the design,
You might realize that your initial approach just isn't working.
it happens. And that's when you need to consider pivoting,
Pivoting.
making a significant change in direction or strategy.
Based on new information market feedback or unexpected challenges.
Exactly. It's an essential skill for those loonshot teams
Who are operating in those uncertain environments.
and need to adapt as they learn,
So recognizing when your initial assumptions were wrong.
or when the market isn't responding as you expected.
And having the courage to change course.
Even if it means abandoning your initial vision,
So it's not a sign of failure,
it's a sign of agility.
a willingness to adapt.
Exactly.
And recognizing that the path to innovation is rarely straightforward.
You have to be prepared to adjust as you go.
So how can organizations create a culture that embraces pivoting?
By encouraging experimentation,
Okay.
celebrating learnings.
And giving teams the autonomy and resources to adapt. So creating that environment where it's safe to experiment and change direction.
Exactly. They can also establish clear processes for evaluating progress, gathering feedback, and making strategic decisions
So creating those feedback loops.
to ensure that pivots are made strategically.
And based on data.
Exactly.
By embracing pivoting.
Organizations can increase their chances of navigating those uncertainties.
And achieving those breakthrough successes.
But even the best loonshots are worthless if they're not protected.
Right. Intellectual property protection is critical.
Especially for those organizations that invest heavily in innovation.
To prevent others from just copying their ideas. Okay, so what is intellectual property and how do we protect it?
Intellectual property refers to those creations of the mind.
Like inventions,
Literary and artistic works.
designs.
And even names and symbols used in commerce.
So it's about protecting those intangible creations.
That result from human ingenuity.
And there are different ways to protect it.
Right.
Okay, so what are those different mechanisms?
Well, you have patents,
Okay.
which protect inventions by granting exclusive rights to the inventor.
For a limited time.
Exactly.
So it's a legal monopoly.
Allowing the inventor to commercialize their invention and recoup their investment.
Right, and then you have copyrights.
Which protect original creative works.
Like books, music, art.
Exactly.
Granting the creator exclusive rights to control how their work is used and distributed.
Right. And then you have trademarks,
Okay.
which protect words, phrases, symbols, or designs.
That identify a particular product or service.
So trademarks are about brand protection.
Making sure consumers can easily recognize and distinguish between different brands.
Exactly.
But finally, you have trade secrets.
Which protect confidential information that gives a company a competitive advantage.
Like formulous processes or customer lists.
Right.
So those secret ingredients that make a company unique.
Thanks.
So choosing the right protection strategy.
Depends on the specific loonshot.
And the organization's goals.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you give me some examples of how these different mechanisms are used?
Sure. Patents are typically used for inventions that are new, useful, and non-obvious.
So something that is truly innovative.
And not something that someone skilled in the field could easily come up with.
Okay.
Copyrights are used to protect original creative works.
Well, trademarks protect brand names and logos.
Right.
Head secrets are used to protect confidential information.
That's not easily reverse engineered or publicly available.
Okay, so it's important to choose the right tool for the job.
It is. Organizations should consult with intellectual property experts to develop a comprehensive strategy.
That aligns with their specific needs.
Yeah.
By protecting their intellectual property.
Organizations can safeguard their loonshots
Create a barrier to entry for competitors.
and secure their position as innovation leaders.
Right. But protecting your intellectual property doesn't mean you have to do everything yourself.
You can leverage external ideas and collaborations.
Through open innovation.
Exactly.
So tell me more about open innovation.
Open innovation is about consciously using external ideas, technologies, and collaborations.
To enhance your own innovation capabilities.
It's about breaking down those traditional silos.
And embracing a more collaborative approach.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of the different forms that open innovation can take?
Crowdsourcing, for one.
Okay.
Soliciting ideas, solutions, or feedback from a large group of people.
often through online platforms,
Right. It's about tapping into the collective wisdom of the crowd.
to generate ideas and solve problems
Exactly. And it can help you access a diverse range of perspectives.
that you might not find within your own organization.
Right.
What other forms of open innovation are there?
Strategic alliances and partnerships.
Okay.
Collaborating with other organizations like universities, research institutions, or startups.
To leverage their expertise, resources, or market access.
Exactly.
So finding those synergistic partnerships.
Where both parties benefit.
And what about licensing agreements?
Those are another form of open innovation,
Okay.
where you acquire the rights to use someone else's intellectual property.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
You can leverage existing technologies or ideas.
And focus your efforts on developing those unique aspects of your loonshot.
So open innovation is about being open to ideas and collaboration
So outside your organization.
to enhance your own innovation efforts.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's about creating those breakthrough successes.
That transform industries and improve lives.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of loonshots.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
from the science of phase transitions to the importance of organizational culture and leadership.
And the power of embracing failure and experimentation
It's clear that nurturing those groundbreaking ideas,
requires a deliberate and multifaceted approach.
it's about creating the right environment
With the right structure, systems, and culture
and empowering individuals
to pursue those audacious goals.
that can change the world.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
okay,
What loonshot are you championing?
what crazy idea are you holding on to?
Don't let fear or inertia hold you back.
Embrace the principles we've discussed today.
And unleash your inner innovator.
The world needs your loonshots.
Now more than ever.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
And remember,
Keep chasing those crazy ideas
because those are the ones
that have the power to change everything.